Hey Davina, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure having you on today.
Hi,
Thank
Hugh.
yeah,
Thanks for
thank you
having
for
me.
yes, thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to our conversation here, and for those who are tuning in, we're going to be discussing today working with communities, and Davina has a very colorful background. I mean, she's worked in a variety of spaces, helping entrepreneurs, working in impact, working globally, different countries. And I'm just like, okay, we're talking about communities. Who better to talk about communities than with somebody who have worked with a variety of communities in different ecosystem around the world, right? So it's such a pleasure and a privilege to have you on. Thank you for joining us again. Now, Davina, I tend to start the conversations with just our guests just giving a quick synopsis of themselves, letting us know who they are, what they're working on. And I know you have multiple hats, but what are some interesting projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, great. No, thank you, Hugh, and thanks for the intro and talking about inviting me to talk about communities. I think it's such a privilege in a way to be able to talk to this topic. So thanks for making that space. My name is Davina. I'm French and British actually, but mostly grew up in French-speaking countries. Um, I've been working in finance and impact since I started my career. I started working in microfinance, so in the early 2000s, which was the big topic at the time for people work wanting to do finance in a way that would be a bit different, in a way that would be more meaningful and impactful on the society that we live in. So I started working on that, and I spent some time in India. So as you've said, I've had the chance to travel quite a lot for my work, and so my first job was actually in India, in Chennai, in an amazing environment where we're trying to understand, what is the impact of microfinance and how, a lot of communities in India were experimenting with different models. So, pretty exciting time to be there, especially at the start of your career when everything is new and you're still very vibrant with passion and enthusiasm to be active in the world. And then, so I've kind of then had, different experiences, worked in the more formal banking sector, in London, in France, and also in Asia, in Taiwan. And then went back to impact. I worked in Cambodia, in an organization that was developing a social enterprise. So, moving, a bit from microfinance to social entrepreneurship, which was also something that we were seeing, in our kind of ecosystem of impact and finance. Actually, Mohammed Yunus, who was at the initiative of a lot of microfinance programs, also kind of was pushing also for this concept of social enterprise, which was quite new at the time.
Yo.
And so I supported an organization in Cambodia that was developing this social enterprise, finding funding for them, investors, impact investors. So these were also a new breed of investors, but interested in that, and spent some time with them, and then went to back to my home country, back to France, where I spent some time in an impact investing fund that, we can discuss a bit more after. And then, last year I moved to Canada. So I'm currently in Vancouver, in sunny Vancouver, which is more rain now. But started working for Spring, which is an organization that really supports a lot of communities by training and programming around impact investment.
And in Vancouver, are you focused locally, or is this more of a global type of firm you're currently with?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a good question for us for spring. I would say both. And so spring is originally started in Vancouver by Keith Ippel, and we've been very active both on national scale. So a lot of programs in Canada supporting Canadian entrepreneurs, impact entrepreneurs, and then also Canadian investors. But also we have a lot of work outside and internationally, outside Canada and internationally, supporting ecosystems. So in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. So yeah, we go a bit where people are interested in the work that we do and interested in working with us. And so, these are always great opportunities to learn and to nurture or to get more exposure to different ways of doing things, which is useful for Canadian work too.
Okay. Now I have some questions for you, especially as we're talking about communities and we're discussing impact as well. What would you say, in your experience, are the difference from local impact and global impact?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, what we see, uh, there's just so many ways of having impact, right? You can organizations or individuals can be very impactful because they support other organizations or projects that are very far away from where they are, and you see the success of platforms like Kiva, where people can actually donate or make loans to projects that are in developing countries, has been big attracted a lot of interest, and so there, and of course all the international aid and international development has been very focused on sending resources from richer countries to poorer countries where the needs are the
Right.
most. So this is a huge part of our space, of our impact space, all the work that is done here. But then you also see a lot, and I think that's what we discussed when we prep this. I mean, we see a lot more initiatives now of how do you create local impact. There is more and more of a need for people to actually see directly the impact that they're having on their communities, and so you do have more and more initiatives, both in developed countries and also in developing countries, like initiatives for people to be able to impact directly their communities, and so it's great to see that the infrastructure now that we are all developing, and the skills that are being developed also in many parts of the world are really focused on, where is the most impact I can have. And sometimes it's just directly in the community.
Now, I've had a ton of conversations surrounding impact, and I suppose I should have asked you this question first, but and I don't necessarily, I must preface with saying I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong answer when it comes to this, but more so perspective, right? And so I'm wondering, when it comes to impact, what what do you consider impact to be? Like, how would you define impact?
Mm. Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it's something that when we are in that space, we need to ask that question to ourselves, more than than we actually do, because it's really at the core. I mean, so what for me, impact is really doing things with the intention of solving for a problem, and not necessarily. I mean, of course, everybody's trying to solve a problem. All businesses are trying to solve for something and create value. But when you're talking about impact investing or impact entrepreneurship, I think at the core of everything that you do, you're really trying to deal with a social or climate issue, and this is driving the efficiency that you're trying to have.
Right.
Instead of kind of seeing financial returns as the main driver for success. I think, when you're in impact, you do have success, and you're being successful if the project that you're dealing with is solving something for not just for yourself and your shareholders, but also for society at large.
A friend of mine have brought something across to my consciousness, and it's a vexing question, and he says something along the lines of, is there enough? Right? And I'm thinking to myself, is there enough? And I think it's a question that many of us who are working in the impact ecosystem in the space, looking to impact the world at whole, our local communities, global communities, whatever it may be. I think it's an interesting question. So I wanted to ask you this right here. And again, these are not right or wrong answers, right, to these. It's just a matter of perspective. But I'd like to hear from you, Davina. Is there enough?
Is there enough what?
Is there enough?
Yeah, that's I don't know how I would answer that. That's a good one. Yeah. Is your friend teasing you when he's asking you that question?
No. Okay, so no, he's not teasing.
I'm lost in translation here for me.
It takes us. It takes us down a rabbit hole. And I like the first question you asked. Is there enough of what? When I was first asked that question, my immediate answer was yes. Yes, there's enough, right? And to the mind, it's like, okay, well, then maybe you have an abundance type of mindset versus if you were like, no, right? But and then from there, as we started conversing, then I started to realize along the way when we started talking about hunger and this and that, we started talking about different things. And I said, you know what? I don't know if there's enough, because we were talking about world hunger. We started talking about impacting the world at large. And then I said, is there enough authenticity in the world? We started talking about those in power and how we haven't seen examples where those in power are looking to relinquish the power so that there's distribution of wealth, so that there's distribution of of the basic necessities that many do not have the opportunity of experiencing. And we see that those at the upper echelon tend to hold most of the wealth, most of the resources, and then there are those at the bottom in poverty that may not even have a meal to eat today, right? And then so on the surface, I'm thinking there's enough food, and then, but why don't everyone have food? There's enough resources for homes. Why don't everyone have resources? And they're billionaires and centi-billionaires. Why don't everyone have enough? And then I'm thinking to myself, maybe there's not enough kindness. Maybe there's not enough generosity. Maybe there's not enough. So on the surface level, when it comes to resources, there may be enough resources. But when it comes to the human elements, maybe there's some things there's not enough of. And I thought that this was an interesting impact question for many of us who are looking to impact the world, impact our communities and whatnot. So I wanted to ask you again, is there enough?
Well, thank you. And just listening to you, I was kind of trying to think of how to answer and how to relate this to impact. I mean, it's something that, is there enough, is there enough in terms of ideas around, what impact should be, I think, and is there enough ways of doing impact, of having an impact, you asked me the question, okay, so what is impact for you? And I answered, what impact is for me, but impact can be something else for, everybody has their own view, their own definition. And I think that's great, because there's never enough ways of impacting the world. Right. I think, we see it, and we were talking about communities at the start. I think, there are very different organizations, at least what I see, what I've seen throughout my career, who are impactful. You have, of course, charities, NGOs, not-for-profits. Then you have the people who are like me, working in organizations that have an impact, and then you have people in large corporations who are trying to be more and more impactful and have an impact. And I think the fact that there's just so many people working around these topics is great, and I don't think there's enough. I think so relating to your rabbit hole question, I think it's we should see all these opportunities to have impact as really something that is the magic of the human mind, is that we can create as many impactful projects as we want if that's what we want.
I'm so thankful that I have someone flexible on the show. I know I just threw this. This is not planned. This is just something. I'm like, what? I think I'm going to ask Davina this. And that was probably when I hit record. But I just thought I wanted to get your perspective on that. And
is there enough impulsivity and spontaneity for you?
Maybe there's a little too much, right?
Right. No, there's never too much.
Right. No, and again, as we're impacting the world, and one of the things I've been trying to work on is really learning how to ask the right questions, not just for podcasts or whatever, but just in general life, with things that I have come to believe to be true, with things that I see on a regular, with information that I receive from others that are in emerging markets or developed markets, and just trying to, because I see myself on a quest, really trying to what's going on, like what's happening in this world, why are things where it's at right now, why is there such a gap, right, between and then you could think, well, those who work, they get to have, and those. So is it that, are you telling me those in Latin America or Southeast Asia are all lazy and they don't work hard? Is that why they don't have? Well, I see that I've come to realize they do work hard. Many work maybe harder than those in the Western world, but they still don't have. So is it a thing of hard work? Or what is it? What is it? What resource that we don't have enough of? What do we have a lot of, and what do we not have a lot of? And Daniel, with his question, helped really concept this thought that's been running through my mind, and I just that's really interesting. We had a back end conversation on Zoom. We just randomly started recording. I wonder if I should share it or not to the YouTube, but we just went on a crazy rabbit trail. We were just talking back and forth about a lot of different things. And so I just thought, again, I ask you that. But let's get back to communities, right? You've had experience working with international communities. You've had experience working, well, I guess right now you're still international because you're in Canada, right? What is the difference in impact, and what is the strategy or the point of focus when thinking globally versus locally in terms of impacting communities?
I mean, I think so. It's true now I'm in Canada, so not in my home country, but I've been so. With Spring, I've been supporting a lot of smaller communities in Canada who are trying to, create this sense of community around impact investing. And so, what you see, and I think you see that in a lot of communities when you have fewer people, usually the investors, invest elsewhere, and the entrepreneurs who are around, they go elsewhere to find funding. And so what we've been building here is creating programs so that these people meet if both are in the same place and both looking for the same things and connections with investors or with startups, let's give them the opportunity to meet and to work together. So this is an approach, and one that we're testing, and we're developing it quite successfully. So we're really grateful for that. But I think, when you look at what works, a lot of projects are developing also now globally. There's a lot of international funding that goes towards developing local projects and also local either local champions, local investors, or local entrepreneurs. And so it's interesting to see how international aid is, sometimes going more towards funding local, and creating more of this self-reliance locally, and funding like the opportunity to develop self-reliance and local community creation, than just relying on international aid or international support for sustainability. And so, when we were discussing this topic trying to see also, answering your question, like what's going on, in this world, and who's doing what, and how are we actually going to progress here? I think it's interesting to note this shift towards cross-border to closer support, and we do see a lot of value from that. I mean, when I was in France in the fund that I was working in before. We were working with a big organization called Investisseurs et Partenaires, and they've developed their main challenge was to say, okay, how do we support African entrepreneurs so that they grow and so that they can become to hire talent locally, give opportunities for people in Africa to stay in Africa, not to immigrate elsewhere, but really to develop opportunities where they grew up. And so what happened with this organization, I think, is quite interesting, is that so they started by saying, okay, we're in France and we'll invest in these local entrepreneurs in Africa. And they evolved that model to saying, well, instead of investing in entrepreneurs, let's invest in local funds. And then they will be the ones, and let's give them the right resources. Let's train, the GPs, so the investors, so that they can then raise funds locally and invest in local African entrepreneurs in the countries that they're in. And so I think that's quite telling. It's one example, but I think it's quite relevant and in line with the needs of the world that we are today. So
basically, utilizing the talents that are already local, because there's already this understanding of the needs of that ecosystem versus,
exactly.
Yeah. And man, I couldn't think of a better way, really. And so I'm wondering then, because you focus on investing in local talent as well, now more so in the Vancouver area. What would you say, because you've invested internationally and locally, what are the differences? What do you look for when you're investing locally in impact versus international?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent everywhere in all the communities that you go into. Whatever the level of wealth in that community, there's always smart people, and there's always people who will kind of get what needs to be done and find ways of making this happen. So, I think investing in providing the right resources to these people is really super important. It's not easy to do in a way that you have to find the right way, the right tools. You can't just come in with a cookie cutter approach. And so I think investing time to understand what are the needs, and then investing time in developing the right tools is what's most important. So of course you need money to do that, and you need to find partners to do it with, because resources don't grow in trees, financial resources at least. So, but yeah, I mean, and so investing time in finding also the right partners, I think is key.
Before we get off here, what would you say are some really interesting projects you've been fortunate to work with so far in your region, or maybe over the years? If you could share some experience of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like thinking here, I think the most interesting projects that you ever work on are those that surprise you.
Okay.
Those where you kind of challenge your assumptions.
Okay.
And I don't know if you see what I mean, but for example, so I worked in a really interesting project in Cambodia, as I was mentioning, and initially I went. So just giving you the background, this was like a circus, like literally a circus.
Oh wow! All right,
and
like with clowns and everything.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So that's what I was doing, and I didn't say it in my intro, because then it goes, there's always a rabbit hole that opens, and people just want to know about the circus. But no, but so just talking about assumptions and how it's great sometimes just to challenge those. I was coming out of working for a bank, so kind of having a very conservative view, as bankers do, of what works and what doesn't. And so I got involved with this project where they were developing a social enterprise out of a circus training program, and and we developed this circus. Which it's show business, right? So a circus is like selling. You need to sell tickets for a good show, and the big surprise for me, especially in coming from France, where the cultural industry is very heavily subsidized, and it's not really traditionally seen as a world where you make money, as I think compared to the US, where of course this is a different industry. But so I wasn't. I came into that project thinking, okay, I'll help them out. Let's see where it goes. And so the real surprise was to see how, they were really able to become a very successful social enterprise, making a lot of money, but also meeting the goals that they had set for themselves in terms of social impact, which was, because we will earn money, we will be able to send money back to the training school that this project came out of, and make them financially self-sustainable. And in the end, this is what happened. And I was coming in with my skepticism and my kind of doubts, and I was just amazed by how successful that project was, because they had a great show, and people wanted to see it, and also because we had people in very strong believers in the team, so I was there for the finance, and I delivered on all the financial aspect, but they really delivered on the vision of the project, and on making sure it was going to be a success. So I think for me that would be one of the really interesting ones. I think, and if I have time for another one.
Yeah.
Like a second one would be one that's so a closer experience. So here in Canada, so we are developing these community of investors in really rural areas of Canada, so in parts of BC. And it's just, and I was just with them last night, online, of course, but, we were kind of working, we meet every week, and, I support them to go through the investment process and to select an entrepreneur in their community that they would want to invest in. And these investors are amazing, they're it was hard getting into that project because it's never been, like setting up this community, investor community has never been done before. So, we built this program with, a lot of also question marks along the way. Are we going to be able to do it? Are we going to find the people? But now that we found them, we found a smaller group than we had hoped initially. But these are like really driven people, and really people who are bought into what we're trying to create. So it's also an amazing surprise, and I think makes for a very 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 exciting experience for everyone involved.
What could you share what industry that's in?
So we have several industries basically. So this program is taking place in the Kootenays, and so an area of BC around our partner who is called CAST. So there are an innovation center in the Kootenays supporting all kinds of tech entrepreneurs. And so we're supporting now 3 entrepreneurs who are developing softwares, but also F&B projects. And so, pretty exciting.
So where are you headed next? You're in Canada now. You've been everywhere: Cambodia, Africa, Europe, everywhere. So how long do you intend on staying in Canada, and where do you see the next stopping point?
No, thanks for asking. I mean, I have a philosophy of life that I am wherever I am now. I'm enjoying, being here at the moment. So I'm not thinking too much of the next move. I'd rather kind of ground myself, make sure I'm really present where I am. But yeah, I mean, excited to see where all of the seeds that we've planted so far are going to grow. That's maybe where I am.
Well, you are a global citizen, so I definitely understand that. And the weather is not too bad so far where you are. So France is probably colder than Vancouver, right? Or no?
Which one?
Is France colder than Vancouver or no?
It's quite similar. So
quite similar. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Man, thank you so much for your time. I hope you had some fun. Did you have some fun on this conversation here?
Oh yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's great.
I threw in some monkey wrenches there.
Yeah. No. But happy that we live in a world where this is possible,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, and excited that we could do this. So
yeah,
and all the best for your podcast, and for asking all these great questions.
No, I appreciate you. Honestly, whenever someone responds and says, Hue, definitely let's do it, I'm just like, yes. And also it's part of that thing where the messages have been coming in. Hey man, I'm following the show. I'm learning a lot. I'm implementing things to what I'm building, what I'm doing, keep it up, So it's like when the ecosystem is getting value from it, it's always nice when people such as yourself give me an opportunity to sit with you, have a quick conversation and what have you. So I want to thank you on that. And looking forward to seeing where your journey leads, and any way that impact could be translated from our end to yours. So thank you so much.
But thank you, Hugh, for the community that you're creating. I mean, you're also creating this community, and so thank you all for listening, and for your community to be present.
A community of global citizens. So talk soon.